And while he was sparring with person A and working with them and helping them cultivate, he would do things and highlight that he'd be trying, and they would look over you and say, have you recognized that he was doing the thing that he talked about with you? It was amazing.
Welcome to the Martial Theory Podcast.
Thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Known you a long time. It's finally great to sit down and have a conversation like this.
Yes.
And here we are at the Renaissance Martial Arts Festival in Rochester, New York, which you're hosting, and really honored to be here. And what a great gathering it is of so many talented instructors. And it's something I actually meant to say this morning to the students, was to say, you know, the amount of experience in terms of instructors that we have here who are openly sharing their stuff is just extraordinary. You know, kudos to you for putting this on. Thank you. You took over Saratoga Martial Arts Festival, which is amazing. And so it's really honored to sit down here with you and have a great time. People in the Northeast martial arts community certainly know you and know your skill sets and so forth, but it's going out around the world. So give us a little sense of your background in the arts. Give us just 2 minutes on Mark Cardona's upbringing and background.
As a kid, like most kids, you know, loved seeing martial arts movies and so on. Just got excited about that and enjoyed it so much. That sort of led me to self-teaching for a period of time. So I, would watch movies and go out and practice in the backyard on my own.
Yeah.
And then eventually I got my first martial arts book, which was Bill Wallace's Book of Karate. I took that book and started teaching myself from the book. Sort of through that chain of events, in the neighborhood that I grew up in, there was a lot of martial arts schools. There was also a very major corporation, Kodak. And a lot of the people that transplanted to come to work for Kodak from various parts of the country lived in or around the neighborhood that I was in. And eventually sort of this neighborhood martial arts group formed itself. And people would kind of share the stuff that they were, did. And also students from a lot of the schools that were around there. So for a number of years throughout most of my teens, I was part of this backyard martial arts group.
That sounds fun.
We mixed in a little bit of WWE wrestling too.
A few chairs, steel chairs.
Yeah. So I found that I was drawn to more of the Chinese arts that I was exposed to than the Japanese at that particular moment in my life. So that kind of made me look for that as my first opportunity to learn. And there wasn't very much in our area, but there was a school that was teaching Shaolin Kung Fu. And so I went from the backyard scenario to eventually training at a Shaolin school for a couple of years. And then from there, reconnected with a backyard friend who was training with Sifu Milton Newsom, who became my Sifu. And that's where I spent the bulk of my formal training, official training, was with him.
After what style was that?
The style was called Tai Quo, which came from Charles Curry. Charles Curry taught several people in the area. And two of the people that he taught were Milton Newsom and Scott, whose name I can't remember right now. And so his training with him, plus whatever other arts he was exposed to, became the art that I trained in, from him.
Yeah. And so how would you characterize that? Was it, what kind of training did that involve? What kind of Kung Fu were you learning there? I mean, such a broad term.
It is. The best way to describe the art, I think, at that point in time was everything was about distilling application and being able to use it. So on top of being taught specific animals like tiger, crane, and monkey, at least as far as what he worked on with me, I guess, and put it like that, Milton was able to take an individual within the class, teach the base martial art, and then refine for that individual in terms of what they liked, what they were interested in, and what he wanted to learn, I guess we would put it. So what I gained from him was a soft style of tiger, crane, and monkey. Those were the three animals that we focused mostly on for me. But the art was application driven 100% of the time. He taught technique, he taught principle via combinations of technique, and we drilled that, and then we fought all the time.
If you say we taught principle and then combination of technique, I mean, can you give me an example?
So I guess the best way to describe it would be, so we didn't do forms, right? I'm sure that I know several crane forms and several tiger forms and several monkey forms if I was to somehow chain the multiple sets or combinations together,
Yeah.
but never taught as a form. The way he approached it, which is to this day how I approach it, is there was a series of movements, blocks, strikes, footwork, etc. And within the context of that, both in the interplay between partner A and partner B, the technique highlighted principle, like the whole straight line angle circle thing that we talk about,
Yeah.
right? So what we were doing were principles being manifest in physical technique, sort of the best way to describe it. So using the angle against the straight line, transferring from soft to hard, doing height change. All these things were part of the combinations that he taught all the time. Everyone was different. Everyone highlighted something, whether we knew it or not.
Yeah.
Now, to be honest with you, Stephen Miller was a phenomenal instructor, but he was not word driven. So he explained some things to us, but a lot of it was self-explanatory. You did the movement, you gained what it was, you figured out what was being done, and then you sorted it for yourself. So he gave us some information, but everything was not on a silver platter, right? It was the way he explained it to me was the way the style worked for him, and the way he wanted us to have was he wanted to provide us with a set of tools and ideas and a baseline of how the art worked, which was very definitive at first, but to allow us to evolve it for ourselves, right? And that was huge, I think, for me.
If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe, like, and follow. What takes 5 seconds for you actually means a great deal on our end. More than that, nothing is more powerful in our martial community than word of mouth. So please tell other martial artists you know about this podcast. Better yet, send it to them. And if you haven't already, please check out my book, Martial Theory, which has been called The Art of War for the Martial Arts, and which is available on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and audiobook formats. And if you want to join the movement of martial artists coming together to dig deep into martial arts theory and strategy, then join us at martialtheoryu.com, where a range of senior instructors and I provide instruction, articles, live events, Q&A sessions, discussion forums, and more. Martial Theory University is also where you can see instructors interviewed here demonstrate the concepts that they discuss on the podcast. And when you join us at martialtheoryu.com, please make sure you save 20% with the code MTPodcast. Finally, if you don't want to join us at Martial Theory University, but want to support the time and effort it takes to produce this podcast, then please support us on Patreon, which you can do for as little as $5 a month. But once again, if you join us at Martial Theory University, make sure you use the discount code MTPodcast for 20% off while it lasts. And now, this week's episode.
One of the things that I recognized in you when I first saw you, and it's even more true now, but it was one of the things that certainly I really respected about your application of the arts. And I have to phrase this carefully, and I have to phrase it carefully because it's wrong. I have to phrase it carefully because I just want to make sure my point is very clear here. You know, there are tons of Kung Fu practitioners who can certainly apply and be competitively effective with what they're doing. And we all know, we both know a bunch of them.
Yeah, first, very many, right?
Sure, right. No question about it. But you have this particular way of doing Kung Fu, and I mean this in a good way, not a bad way. That was where you were doing the Kung Fu and it was completely applicable Kung Fu. Might have been monkey, might have been tiger, might have been some combination because of my ability to blend them. But it wouldn't really necessarily look a lot like Kung Fu in its application. Is that a fair thing to say? Because I mean it as a compliment, which is to say the movement looks so natural and so appropriate to the moment, so contextualized, right? That the flamboyance of the form of the mechanics that we would see in the form dissolved properly so that it became combative and natural in the moment and didn't look as much like you're doing monkey, even though we certainly were.
Right.
Is that accurate? And I think it is. And if so, people listening understand how to make that transition from their forms to application.
Okay. So a couple of things come to mind. when I go to teach seminars, for instance, I do things. And this is a common mind to hear. So because I make a tiger claw with my hand doesn't mean I'm using tiger. Although the technique look at until you embody the essence of it, it is not that particular style or type, right? So the thing that I gained from Qigong was the essence of the animal or style, not so much purely the physical technique. There are some definers that you associate and attach with them, but it was about taking the feel and some principle and having that become the technique, not the technique becoming the other side. Does that make sense? So when I would do something, yes, I was using monkey, I was using tiger, I was using crane, I was using the art as a whole, but it wasn't, as you put it, flamboyantly expressed because it was original, but didn't need to be anymore, right? So we all bought into the Kung Fu, right? We all bought into the broad movements and the big expressive side of it. But, he whittled that down for us over time so that when we did a little parry or a little movement, it was from X, Y, or Z, but it was just not minimalized, but just brought down to the base of what it needed to be. So, when I do things, it's all the styles combined together at a given moment. And what I loved about training with Seafood Milton, and I used to talk about this all the time, it was like he had a backpack on, and in the backpack were 5, 6, 7 different arms. At any given point, you reach his hand in the backpack and pull this one out. Individually, I know a lot of people that can do that. But in terms of sparring with him or fighting with him or doing things, over the course of a progression of combination of techniques, I literally would see him change arts in each movement across the series. And that always just impressed me. His ability to do that once you could define what the art was with it. So he literally would just ping, 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 and da-da-da-da-da. And I really worked hard to absorb that. I really worked hard to be able to manifest the changes across the range of the things that were occurring.
How would you help other people training in traditional arts make that same kind of transition to, and I think the way you described it, I'm not going to capture the language back perfectly to you, but it was getting the feel, getting the essence of the animal or the essence of the expression rather than just the form of it. The essence is really where you found what was more, I want to say more important. Yes. But eventually the important element to express out. But how do other people do that? If I know you're not a Shotokan expert or what have you, but if someone's doing different arts or they're doing Kung Fu,
right?
What's the trick there?
That's a good question. I think to me, it has to start off with, as you train your core, every specific style has a flavor. And most of the time, you can look at a Shotokan person, and if you know other arts, you can clearly tell they're Shotokan. Some arts are a little more ambiguous, right? But some arts are very clearly defined, at least both in physical movement and expression. I think at some point you have to take the core, you have to absorb it into you, and then you have to manifest as much of that and you together at the same time. But it starts off with the understanding the fundamental of the physical technique, and then understanding what was the energy or thing that was being applied while you did the technique. So for us, Tiger was mostly fire, right? Multiple rapid fire explosions of energy and intent. Crane was, for me in particular, was cold. It was aloof. It was both simultaneously disconnected and connected at the same time.
What does that mean?
It meant that how you carried yourself, how you moved relative to the other person was, I'm royalty, you are a peasant, and the whole world is mine, and how dare you come into my space? And you're going to suffer because you did that. But I'm going to do it from a distance because I don't want to be close to or next to you. So there's things like that. For me, Monkey was both a combination of how to play while being serious, right? So all those things show up in what I do, but they all came from starting off with that in its base form, working on it, absorbing it into yourself, and then being able to somehow combine that and you manifest that in what you're doing.
You find you rely on one more than the other? Is there something you favor? And also this question for you, because I've known you 25 years.
25 years now.
Well, we go way back.
I do.
And I've certainly watched your embodiment of your martial arts change over time, right? And as it should, and evolve. And so I think that you definitely lean on some different things, or you express some different things than you used to 25 years ago. What did you lean on more then? And what do you lean on more now?
Well, if I think back to doing seminars, right, and coming in and doing a seminar, a lot of times I was coming in and some of these things haven't been done in seminars, at least that I've been at. So when I came in and I did a seminar on our version of crane, I hadn't really seen that anyplace else. It does exist, but in the seminar circles that we were in, that wasn't really being done very much, or monkey or tiger. So traditionally what I showed was more of those individual animals and or how they worked. And I don't want to say it was for splash, but it was hey, let's look at this thing and you've been seeing this thing before, let me share this with
you. Yeah, if you've never seen monkey, it's fun to act like a monkey for a while,
right, and
kick some ass while you're doing it,
and show that. And then but over time, as we're talking about, those things have been trimmed down a little bit. They're less overall expressive, but still in context. If I had to pick the areas that I like to function at the bridge distance, right? And rely on and use bridge and sensitivity to augment, trigger, and activate the things that we're doing. But we also cultivate, range extension into combat. So kicking to punching, punching to triple grappling, throws, takedowns, and continuous range expression back and forth. Where I've evolved has been, trying to exist in the transition ranges, not the primary ranges. And so that's why you see a lot of what I do starts out, goes in, gets in, works towards takedown, et cetera, but it uses sensitivity, bridge, trapping, where applicable.
You just said something that's absolutely fascinating. That it's really got me thinking, which is, and wow, I mean, this might be an interesting defining characteristic of what separates some martial artists from others. You said operating in the transitions.
Yes.
Instead of the ranges or instead of the individual techniques, but in the transitions.
Yes.
I want to hear a little bit more about that, because that's utterly such a great concept. And it actually precipitates something that I was going to ask you about, which is that, all martial arts express all theories, but some we see it manifest more than in others, and might lean on some more than others. And that's the nature of things. And one thing that I've always noticed about your art and your particular expression of it and how you teach it and practice it is that one of the theories I talk about as a governing theory is adapt, but never negotiate.
Yes.
And when I see you work, I always learn something about adapting and never negotiating.
Yes.
Now I think as we connect that idea of operating the transitions, that cycles right into what I was going to ask you about as well. Can you talk to us about operating in the transitions and what it is? What does it mean to adapt and not negotiate from your perspective?
So the range thing for me was, most people group the traditional ranges into long kicking range, long hand striking range, shorter hand striking range, and then something else that occurs after that. So, the old Bruce Lee, 5 ranges of combat. Yeah. The most important range of combat being the heckling range, by the way. So let's just be honest about it. Again, coming from Milton and watching him change. So also the animals for us were sort of a particular range of combat as well. Tiger was more middle distance for us. Crane was mostly long, but there was short. You know what I mean? There was Wing Chun in there. There's other stuff that was either he got from someplace or got from Charles. I don't know, it's not clear, you know what I mean? But it was there. But what I learned through constantly fighting or sparring was that if I fought only in one wheelhouse, no matter how good I was in that one wheelhouse, there was someone who was going to be better at that. So there was going to be a better kicker than me. There was going to be a better striker, a better girl. So what developed for me and developed for us within the art was the ability to change range and to exist at that area where you're transitioning from one range to other and have techniques in that area, right? And that way, it wasn't a hard stop from kicking to punching. So we always worked on whether we were, the phrase was, we fight on the way in, we fight on the way down, we fight on the way up, and we fight on the way out. So it made sense to us and to me to have things that were fluidly able to transition across the ranges. And to be able to do that, you had to have things that fell in between the two. So a very long hand technique was at the end of a short kick. And then it kind of went like that. So, and it was always about, for me, to be able to adapt to what was being given to me, at the same time not folding because of what was being given to me. So there was always the ability to write your code on top of the base code that was being given to you. So you accept it and you use it, but then you write into it.
Interesting.
You know?
Yeah. But you do that not just through range, but you change energies.
Yeah, absolutely.
As you also transit. You train. How does that energetic shift happen? Is that because you're used to the feel of the different range, or what else is happening to shift the energy that you're using?
So it's both what you're used to, what you're being given, and it's hard, but simultaneously you have to be able to accept what's being given and use that, but not be completely shaped by it.
So, yeah. So why? So because it's not a negotiation. So I want viewers to get, or listeners to get the notion that you're negotiating, since you don't negotiate. And so you're saying accept what you're given. Sounds like now I'm negotiating with you,
right?
But you're not negotiating with them. Why isn't it negotiation? Why is it just that?
It's not a negotiation because I can pick and choose what I'm accepting from you. If I feel like what you're offering the equation, if I'm not able to come up with a complement to what you're offering, then I'm going to overwrite, right? To get to the goal, which is if we're fighting for ourselves, fighting for self-defense purposes, whatever it is, at some point you got to put your hands on the person, right? Or the case, and at some point they're trying to do the same thing to you. So you have to take the input that's given, cultivate your answer to that by borrowing and using it, but not letting it dictate what you're doing. Does that make sense? And sometimes it's an energetic battle. Sometimes it's a physical. It's usually both. It's all of them. It's principal, energetic, and physical, all those three things at the same time. So you have to be able to draw from all the sources, sort to the answer, and get to the solution.
Right.
Right.
So the fact that, so they're asking, essentially, they're throwing a punch, they're asking a question, and you can give different ways to answer, but any of those answers can definitively answer the question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's be honest. Sometimes it's your mood. What's the altercation that I'm in?
Yeah.
Am I sparring in a cooperative situation, working with somebody, sparring in a non-cooperative situation, am I in a self-defense situation? Has that person expressed, sadly, desire to engage with me for the purpose of harming me and continuing on to harm my family and friends?
Yeah.
And the answer is always no.
Right.
It will not happen.
Right.
And I will determine that will not occur. So you see what I mean?
Yeah. So in addition to your particular training or development, you obviously cross-trained in a lot of stuff. And you draw a lot of things into your circle.
Absolutely.
And you're very open-minded, and so forth. And I think part of your culture that I love of training, one reason I love this festival is just this family feel of we've been together in training, a little martial family, and we're learning from one another. But I'd love to know what was it? If not an art that was a particular influence, or an instructor that was a particular influence, or a moment working with somebody outside of your group that was pivotal for you, something that really for you changed your understanding of martial arts, changed your understanding of combat. What was a paradigm shift for you?
So I think it was a moment extended over time.
Yeah.
It starts with seafood military. So in the Shaolin school that I was in, that particular school has a very closed mindset. Didn't embrace anything from outside at all, other than the one time he brought in a Filipino practitioner, Kali practitioner. I'll tell you that story later today. But that school was very close. We only do this way. And I came from that multiple training background for years in the backyard before I trained officially. So it was very hard for me to let go of the multiple possibilities thing, but I did, and I embraced it for a amount of time. In training with Sifu Millen was very well connected with the martial arts community in Rochester. And what we did regularly, he brought us to other schools to spar. That was mostly cooperative, right?
Yeah.
But he had this relationship, and also we had an open door policy. People could come in and work with us and spar with us, but he brought us to other schools regularly to spar. True story. At one point, he was connected with these different schools. And he was connected with an Aikido Jiu-Jitsu school locally. And a couple weeks before, and he goes to me and says, next Thursday, I want you to meet me here. So we drive out and we show up at this Aikido school, or Aikido Jiu-Jitsu school. We walk in, has me sit on the bench, goes in the room, talks with the instructor for a couple minutes, comes back out and says, I want you to do the class. Yes, Sifu. So I do the class. It's awesome.
Right.
Right?
Teach.
No, I went to there and I did the class.
Their class.
Right? So did the class. Great. Finished the class. He said to me, I started with the instructor. I'd like you to train here on top of training at the Kung Fu school.
Right.
Yeah, Sifu. So for a year, I trained Aikido Jiu-Jitsu and still attended school. And the thing was, whatever I was learning there, I had to bring back and make work in sparring at the school. So he promoted cross training a long time before it was an obvious thing for a lot of other places. And then we continued to do that, like in various takes throughout my entire time with him. So that was installed in me then. And then, when I sort of stopped training and I was on my own, I started working through the art that I had with him and continuing to work. But even while I was actively with him, I would attend a seminar here or there just to go. And then little by little bit, upon stopping there, as I was developing myself beyond that point, I started just attending any seminar I could get my hands on locally or distance wise. And eventually attended my first Ensano seminar at Sifu Kevin Seaman's place down in Portland. And of course, within our research model that we had anyway, we were getting books and videos and looking at everything that was out there. And again, I continued to find myself drawn to more of the Chinese aspects than the Japanese aspects. But at some point, I got more formal instruction in JKD and Wing Chun, and that impacted and influenced how I was going forward. And when I look back at how Qigong Milton was doing things, in a lot of ways, and I say this without, due reverence, it was kind of the JKD model of some respects with the arts that he had and the classical arts that he had. So we did everything in a very modern context. We did deep stances, we did classical things, but that was for training, but everything else was modernized. So if you want to talk about influences and impacts on me, other than that, I'm getting a chance to be exposed to JKD, then be able to follow that for a period of time. That influenced and streamlined some of the things that I was doing. Same thing, we had some Wing Chun in our art, but it wasn't really formalized. So I had a chance to train Wing Chun more formally and kind of build the connective tissue to what we did originally. I think one of the greatest influences post Sifu Milton spiritually was Sifu Eric Free. I met him at an Asano seminar, formed friendships with him, and he became a friend and a mentor. And I studied with him, but I studied as much with him philosophically and spiritually as I did physically. So I find him to be a very big influence on that aspect for me.
What did you take from him philosophically? He was such a big personality.
He was.
Such a thoughtful guy.
Yeah. So what came from him was part of what came from Milton for me. So what I believe Qigong Milton did, the greatest gift that he gave me was the cultivation of belief in self. And it's not that I didn't believe in myself. I did, but trained from him how he poured his energy into each of us and how he believed in us as a person and as a martial artist and helped us build that self-reliance, self-confidence. And then Sifu Eric was kind of the same way. You know what I mean? He's, the internalization of belief in self and the importance of your training and how you conduct yourself as a human being, and, what do you give back? When you're teaching students, what are you giving to your students? A lot of it was feeding with Sifu Eric as well.
Before we continue, just a quick reminder that if you want to see our guests demonstrating the theory they discuss here on the podcast, then join us at Martial Theory University by going to martialtheoryandtheletteru.com and make sure that you use the coupon code MTPodcast for 20% off while it lasts. Also, if you're enjoying thinking theoretically here, or even if you just enjoy thinking at all, and you want to learn more about it for your career, as a parent, or just for your own development, then please visit my Substack, Perlman Actual Intelligence, for tips, instruction, and discussion on critical thinking. Just go to Substack, Perlman Actual Intelligence.
Take this to a different direction a little bit, because you are, highly skilled, and there's no question about that. I want to know, either in a dojo or in a street closed door session or what have you, and other than from Milton, it's the time you got your ass kicked and you learned something. What's one that stands out as a real lesson for you? It'd just be one time somebody landed something on you that was surprising, or sometimes you really got a beat down, or anything in between.
I've had plenty of beatdowns, like plenty. There were several schools locally that hosted sparring events, right? And, we would attend those. And there was plenty of times that I was there, and no matter how skillful I was, there were people that were considerably better than I was. There was Bill Harp, local martial artist, who had a very successful school for numbers. One of his students was an outstanding fighter, and he just pelted the snot out of me, right? And he was very fast and he's very powerful. And so one of the lessons that came home from that was the reaffirmation of the reality that when you do face somebody who is stronger or faster, what do you have that you can use for that situation? So that drove home the position and structure thing for me, right? So growing up, well, most of my teenage and through my 20s and maybe in early 30s, like a $145. I was 6 foot tall and $145. I'm not winning a strength battle. Never. Reasonably fast, pretty sharp mouth, got me in trouble, let's be honest. But, I had to learn technique, and I had to learn distance, and I had to learn timing in order to be successful in sparring bigger, stronger, and faster people. But I got pelted. One of the early times when I was working with both Sifu Eric and Sifu Kevin Seaman, I got pots to the next century, right? And to experience that level of trap and pot was like magical in terms of how important it was. And Sifu, interesting things. He said to me once, "You are more than fast enough, but you are not strong enough." Because I solved when I could, I solved everything based on speed. Reasonably gifted for speed, right?
Right. It's one of the things I talk about in martial theory is the danger of relying on speed.
Absolutely.
Speed can be a trap, because we can win a lot.
Yeah.
Faster.
Right.
But we can hide, as Dan and Asanto said, you can don't hide your inadequacies.
Yes.
With speed.
Yeah. True. Very true. So like when I was in trapping range, I could, when I could do it, I only had to open the door very small because speed could take over. And one of the things that got emphasized to me later on was, look, you meet a skillful person, guy in sensitivity, that's how it works. So you have to have power and strength in what you're doing on top of speed. And I knew that, I understood that, but I relied on speed as much as I could. So that was a very important and telling lesson, but fighting a good range fighter and getting my butt handed to me a number of times. So was,
I've been there.
The first time I actually sparred with a boxer and got my butt handed to me. You know what I mean? So all those things. The first time I started doing any groundwork and I got smeared, you know what I mean? And I always liked it and invested in a little bit, but to roll with somebody who's extremely good, and then on top of that being not only good, but having 50 to 75 pounds on me at all times, you know what I mean? I got hosted repeatedly, so.
So in our modern martial arts world, with the emergence of UFC, the rise of Krav, traditional martial arts taken a beating in service of their reputation, and in terms of their criticisms of them and so forth. Maybe that some of that is deserved and some of it is not. So it's a twofold question. To what extent and why are some of the criticisms of traditional arts these days valid? And extent there question, right? So you can cut it off wherever you want in terms of the validity. 1%, 99%. Right. Yeah, and I'm generalizing about criticisms, but generally, not being practical and not being realistic. What have the traditional arts done potentially to bring some of that upon themselves? And how do we get out?
I think people show up at a martial arts school for a percentage of these three things. They want to learn to defend themselves. understand that training is a martial art role for personal growth, and the fitness aspect. You show up for percentage of these three things. The longer you stay, the bucket changes percentages, right?
Right.
At some point, if you've trained at a school for enough time, you should feel fundamentally confident in your ability to defend yourself. So why do you continue to train? If you've reached a point where you feel like you're basically competent, so why do you continue to train? You need to train for other things and train for personal cultivation. So once you learn to fight, punch, kick, block, this stuff, how much more do you really need to do? And on what your goals are and your drives. Traditional martial arts are incredibly valuable, and they really should be re-embraced, I feel. And where things have suffered is that any traditional martial art that has not evolved into today is where the problem is. And I think, you know what I mean? So when we want to learn to protect ourselves and defend ourselves in today's society, we are dealing with more than one attacker. We're dealing with the likelihood of weapons. We're also dealing with now in the last time was the likelihood of the person that you may or may not get in a fight to defend yourself. That probably has had some training. And if they haven't had it formally, they've been watching UFC videos or, you know, whatever style karate kung fu videos and have taught themselves just enough to be dangerous to themselves and danger to you. So the days of when I was in school and we had to go out back at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with some things, right? And it was basically whoever kind of got the first bloody punch in, and kind of the fight was done. That's right. I'm dating myself. That doesn't exist anymore. No. Right. So I feel like traditional martial art can absolutely stay true and teach all the traditional aspect, which is discipline, etiquette, ethic, martial training, cultivation of self-defense. Traditional martial arts needs to come back, it needs to be taught for all the things that it offers. And in the context of training, the basics of self-defense are there. But if they're stuck in 1950s or pre that, and then the extrapolation of bunkai from the forms of katas hasn't been, here's how it was done traditionally, here's how we do it today. I always thought about this in my class. Everybody that starts out, we start out in the modern era, and we train going back in time, eventually. We go modern, traditional. So at some point, if you're with me long enough, you know that means deep senses, right? So now we're training for we're training for the root. Like where we are right now, when we first start is, you know, closer stances, upright hands, so on. I think any martial art that has not embodied the ideas of how to fight on the ground is not doing a service to their students if the students are there to learn to defend themselves. Yeah. Any art that hasn't cultivated a method to deal with a club attack, a blade attack, within reason, the presentation of a firearm and how you may or may not defend it getting a distance that's available to you is not doing the student justice. And they can both exist at the same time.
Absolutely. I think that I agree with you. And I think that, you know, something that's forgotten about traditional or classical martial arts training is that it often was done for the warrior.
Yes.
So you would train that way for, 8 hours a day, right? And all the time, every day. That is what you did.
Yeah.
And then we took those things. Now we're learning them on a hobby level, a couple nights a week at our dojo.
Yeah.
And to train potentially, everyone can do what they want. And as you said, different people are seeking different things.
Sure.
But one thing that would be possible is to take an aspect of that classical system, not the whole thing, that people will learn to pass it on and fight with it proficiently as masters, but master that some initial elements on a practical level, and then start to expand that circle out instead of teaching the whole system sort of from the ground up, potentially. It's another approach that we can adapt more to modern times when we're hobbyists instead of warriors with it. So you've been teaching a long time. I've watched you teach. I watch your teaching evolve. Thank you. You're always a great teacher, right? It's always great to see it evolve too, right? I'd love to know what a piece of advice you have for other martial arts instructors out there, maybe younger ones who are coming up. They could be great younger instructors, but we should be better ones as older instructors. What's a piece of advice you have for other people teaching the martial arts?
I think for me, that made a difference in how I progressed my instruction is side note. So I attend these multiple art seminars on a regular basis. I haven't attended a seminar in a lot of years with the idea that I'm going to learn a technique. I've attended seminars for years for the purpose of watching how other instructors teach
Mm.
and learning from when they present information. And is it wide? Is it deep? You know what I mean? How do they handle the group of people? So I've been, there's learning to teach and teaching yourself how to teach and that whole process. You know what I mean? There's special words for it, but I don't want to destroy them and not say them right. But you have to teach yourself how to teach. And so this process over time for me has been to the point where what I was recommending to anybody if they're just starting or been doing this for a while is you have to understand that you teach a group and then you teach an individual. So you present your material to a group, whether it's your class or seminar, and you lay the individual things. And then if you have the ability to have a student over time, you are going to teach each one individually on top of teaching the group. So Milton would always say, I will teach you everything I know. And he does. And he'd always say, we did ask him about a technique and it was never, you're not ready for that. He said, I will show you anything that you want. Doesn't mean you can use it to beat me, but I'll show it to you. But over the course of every class that we were in, he would teach everybody the same thing first, and we would all drill that. And then this is how we did it while sparring, working with an individual on the floor he was sparring with. He would work on what that person needed. But then he had this magical ability if he was sparring with you and I was sitting on the sideline, he spoke to me about a particular technique or process or theory. While I was sparring with you, at a certain moment, he would do something that I needed. Then this is true, absolutely on the regular. So when the basement was not even the size of this room, and the ceiling was maybe 6 foot on a good day with rafters. So when we jumped in, we jumped between the rafters. But there was only room for like maybe 2 people, maybe 4 people to spar at one time, give or take a little, have the freedom of the floor. So the rest of us sat on the side. And while he was sparring with person A and working with them and helping them cultivate, he would do things and highlight that he's not, and then would look over you and say, "How you did," or whatever. And he would see you, have you recognize that he was doing the thing that he talked about with you. It was amazing. So
Wow.
That's impressive. You teach to a group, and then your individual student, you're going to have micro conversations with them and ideas and help them individually cultivate the group thing that's being taught. And that was to me, that was one of the biggest things.
Great piece of advice. Last question. We have martial artists around the world watching this and listening to us. Mm-hmm. What's a message you want to send out to the martial arts community?
You might attend a school and you're learning, and it needs to be more than just a couple nights a week mentally. It's like I get our life schedules, our world schedules. You go to class a couple nights a week, but build a notebook, build a lexicon, put things in there, ask yourself questions, come back to those things, and continue to invest in your art, and then your art will invest in you, and then that cycle will continue. And sometimes investing in your art means learning something, finding coincidental information in another art and helping to source you back in. Don't be afraid to do that.
Yeah.
That being said, I love homogenous arts, right? And I love that, like Sifu Harris, training one art.
Yeah.
And everything that he problem solves with is in that art for him, right?
Right.
And it's beautiful. So there's homogenous arts and there's, mixed arts. But as long as there's a codex for that particular art, use that to solve everything and just constantly invest in it, and it will invest in you and continue to do that. That's the thing, I think.
Seems inarguably valuable to me. Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
It's been so long.
Please share the work we're doing here with other martial artists. And of course, please subscribe and follow. To see instructors interviewed here demonstrate the theory they discuss, join us at Martial Theory University by going to martialtheoryu.com and make sure you use the discount code MTPodcast for 20% off while it lasts. Finally, if you generally enjoy thinking and want to learn more about it, then please join my Substack, Perlman Actual Intelligence.